Well, hello everybody, and welcome to video 4 as we're going through my book, From Debtor to Better, The Details of Debt and How to Get Out. As I've said in all of these videos, you do not have to have a copy of the book to participate, but here it is if you happen to want it. From Debtor to Better, The Details of Debt and How to Get Out. You can get it on Amazon if you find it to be useful as we're going through these videos. We are basically going chapter by chapter, topic by topic. You're learning a little bit extra that's not in the book, and of course I'm not covering everything that is as we go through these videos. So with that said, let's dive into topic number 4, and that is breaking the cycle of paycheck to paycheck living. Sadly, CNBC came out with an article last week that said 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 78%. In my book, I had put 70%, and that was about the right number then. That was in 2015 when I did my latest research, and there's been numbers that have gone up and down. The economy really doesn't dictate how that works out, but I'll say this, many of you who are watching are living paycheck to paycheck, which means if something goes wrong with payroll at your job, or if you walk into the boss's office and he or she says, "I'm sorry, we just don't need you anymore," you're broke. That is a sad place to be, and today we are going to break that habit. We're going to break that place because we don't want to be there anymore, okay? I promise, you don't want to be there. If you've never been there before, freedom feels really nice, and that is a great first step to freedom, okay? So let's first review the homework that I gave in the last video, and that was I wanted you to look back 10 years. I wanted you to say, okay, since 2009, the beginning of 2009, what has happened in my life? What have been the financial implications? And I really wanted you to think on that exercise, spend some time there. If you haven't watched that video, please go back and do so. Second, I wanted you to define your why. Because if it's not important for you to get out of debt, if it's not important enough that you would change, then guess what? You're wasting your time and mine by being here. You're wasting time that you could be doing something else more important, like watching YouTube or taking a nap. I don't know what would be more important than generating financial freedom that you could invest a few minutes of your life into. But whatever. If it's not important to you, if your why doesn't cause you to want to change, then you shouldn't be here. So I ask you to spend some time working on your why. What is your why? And I would love if you would comment. Just tell me what your why is. Why is it that you want to be out of debt? Why is it you want financial freedom? Okay, so with those 2 homework assignments that I gave you last time, let's dive into today, where, as I said, I promised the last video that we were getting ready to dive in on the things that you could, rubber meets the road, take action on. So what are we going to do? How do we break the cycle of paycheck to paycheck living? Well, this is the part of the story where Barry has to be, well, we've got to face reality, okay? People are scared most of the time of what they don't know. We're going to face reality no matter how big and ugly it is. We're going to face it and say, I'm done. I am going to take charge of my finances because I'm the one in charge, not my money. So emergency fund is where we've got to start. We've got to start with a sum of money, of cash, that is going to keep us from the cycle of going into debt or relying on that next paycheck for us to survive financially. That is the obvious, the simple, and I'm sorry, that's just the answer. Because the only way you can avoid debt is to have a sum of money that you have set aside that will keep you from debt should life happen. You know, we've all faced that country music scenario where, you know, your wife leaves, your dog dies, your truck breaks down, all that good stuff. And as I jokingly say to people when I speak on this topic, you got 2 options. Number 1, you can go to Nashville and write a hit song about it and hope for the best. Or number 2, you can write a check and pay for all that crap and move on. That's the thing that I would prefer to do. When life happens, when things aren't going my way, I would prefer to write a check, say, well, that's sad, I didn't want to spend that money, but oh well, and then move on with my life because I don't want to dwell on it. It wasn't a pleasant experience, and I don't want to be there, and I don't want you to be there. So emergency fund, that's where we've got to start. What is an emergency fund? Well, first off, as I've already sort of alluded to, it's cash. It is money sitting in a boring old savings account somewhere that is just sitting there. It's not going to earn interest very much at all. It's not going to be anything that's sexy or sleek, or it's not impressing anybody, except it's allowing you to sleep better at night. It's allowing you to not have to rely on that next paycheck or the credit card or whatever thing it is right now that would happen if you were to fall into the situation where the income you're earning isn't enough to meet the expenses you face. It is boring. It is cash or a cash equivalent. Now, that means a savings account or a checking account. That does not mean investments. Okay, we're not talking about long-term savings here. We're not talking about investing for our future. We are talking about money that will be there when you need it. So I give the recommendation to folks, especially who are struggling with their obedience and money, is to save this money. We'll talk about how in a minute, but to save this money, go open a savings account at a bank other than your normal everyday bank and do nothing but open this one account for that savings, for the purpose of your emergency fund. Put the money in there and do nothing else. Why? Well, in today's modern age, it's very simple to do electronic transfers. If you have a separate bank with a single account that has nothing except your emergency fund in it, then all you can do if there's an emergency, you've got to ponder, you've got to think and decide, yeah, I really do need to go get that money, and so you have to physically get in your car, you physically drive to that bank, and then you get the money out, and then you go deal with the emergency. Whereas if it's super easy to get to, then this awesome sale will be an emergency, or an overdrawn check will be an emergency that they will draw from that money that you overdrew, and fix it for you, sometimes on your behalf. I mean, there's all these things. Pick a different bank, put your money in that bank, and don't touch it unless there is truly an emergency. It forces you to make sure that the money is going to be spent on a legitimate emergency and not just an oops or not something that you couldn't figure out otherwise, okay? So that's boring, I'm telling you, it's so boring. And yet that is the key to starting the life free of living paycheck to paycheck, okay? That's how you break the cycle. So it is not a credit card either. Let's pause and talk about that one for just a minute. I have so many people who tell me, well, I only keep a credit card for emergencies. Okay, they don't always say it like that. Sometimes I'm like, I only keep a credit card for emergencies, man. Don't give me such a hard time. Well, guess what? Do you want to pay payments on an emergency? Do you want to every single month have to write a check and figure out how to pay for that emergency for the next who knows how many months or years? No, I do not want to continue to live that emergency. I want to write a check and put the thing in my rearview mirror. I want to write a check and move on. So a credit card is not your emergency fund. An investment that goes up and down and you have to ride the wave is not your emergency fund. It is cash. It is money in the bank that you can get to, but not the simplest of ways, so that discipline is a little easier on you, and then you can act accordingly, okay? I hope I've made that abundantly clear. That's what an emergency fund is. Well, the next obvious question is, well, how much? How much do I need to save? If I've got Dave Ramsey fans who happen to be watching this, then they say, well, that's easy. Dave Ramsey says you put $1,000 as your baby emergency fund. I love Dave Ramsey, I really do, and I agree with most everything he says, but this is one place where he and I depart. I do not agree with Dave Ramsey on his $1,000 baby emergency fund, and here is why. I counsel people who make almost nothing, maybe Social Security disability is their sole form of income, and I counsel people who make well into the six figures. If I counsel somebody who makes $500 or $600 a month and tell them, hey, you got to come up with $1,000 before you can start getting out of debt, that doesn't resonate with them. They say, I give up, I can't do that. On the flip side, if I counsel somebody who makes $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, and I tell them they've got to come up with $1,000, they say, okay, I'm done, now what? That doesn't fit for them. So here's the number that I give. This is the rule that I set out for every single person, and there's only one exception. The rule is the amount of one paycheck. Now that's funny, breaking the cycle of paycheck to paycheck living, and the first step of that is to set up an emergency fund. That is the amount of one paycheck. Funny how that works. Interesting. Why do you think I've done it that way? Well, there's multiple reasons, and they're in the book. I'll give you a few of them here. One of them is that it does break the cycle automatically of paycheck to paycheck living. You know that if I don't get my paycheck on Friday, that there is one in the bank that is still there, I can live and not have to, freak out and take all these dramatic changes immediately. Number two, and the most obvious one, is it puts it in the frame of what you're used to receiving as your income. It puts it in your frame. So if you're one of those people that makes virtually nothing, then you have an amount that fits your normal income. If you make a ton, you know, again, those really, really high income earners, then it puts it in the perspective of your expected income. That's pretty simple, right? The third thing that it does is it takes away a number and it puts it in the perspective that fits for you. It doesn't make it unreasonable or unreachable. That's the key, because this whole thing, you need to be able to take action. You need to be able to decide, I'm going to do this, and not just say, well, I'll give it a shot until it gets hard. No, if you've decided to do it, you need to do it. I get a little preachy here, but stick with me, okay? So when you decide, I'm going to do this, you need to set up rules and boundaries and standards that fit what you are actually able to do, and this is one of them. So you set it to the amount of one paycheck. I did say there's one exception. If you only get paid one time per month, take that total amount and divide it in half. Because, again, I'm trying to set it to something that is reasonable for you to accomplish and something that will break the cycle of paycheck to paycheck living. If nothing else, it buys you a couple of weeks should everything fall apart. Okay, again, payroll doesn't happen on Friday, you're expecting the check, now what? Well, you've got a couple of weeks to figure it out. Whether that means you go pick up a second job, whether that means you go borrow some, whatever it means that you decide is the right next move for you. We're trying to get out of debt here, so hopefully borrowing isn't it. But again, we now have bought you a couple of weeks to determine what the next right move is for you. Make sense? I hope that fits. I mean, it's good common sense. It should be pretty straightforward. So let's not overcomplicate it, okay? So the amount of a single paycheck, unless you get paid once a month, and then it's half of a paycheck. Simple enough as far as that goes. So here is your homework. Oh, actually, before I go into that, let me tell you one other thing. A lot of people give me this hard time when they say, I'm barely making ends meet, how am I supposed to save the amount of a paycheck? Now that gets us into our homework, okay? Because your homework is this. I want you to write down 5 ways that you could legally, legitimately, reasonably, I hate to give those clarifiers, but I will, come up with your emergency fund over the next 2 weeks. Now you maybe can knock it out sooner, maybe can take a little longer. I get that, okay? But you know, if it's tax season, guess what? If you're getting a refund, that makes it pretty darn super easy. Don't waste the tax refund. Build your emergency fund. If you're in a season where it's yard sale season, have a yard sale. If you're in a season where, in fact, it could be yard sale season any time of the year because there's Craigslist, there's Facebook Marketplace, there's all these other things. If you got stuff sitting around, sell it. Okay? I've given you some ideas there, but I want you to write down 5 ways that in the next 2 weeks you could come up with your emergency fund. Now that doesn't mean that you have to have it in the next 2 weeks, but don't delay this. Don't waste your time saying, what could I do? There's so much time that gets wasted on us thinking when we should be doing. Now I don't want you to not think, but I don't want you to think so much that you don't do. All right? So think and then do. So that's homework assignment number 1. I want you to write down 5 ways that you can come up with the emergency fund, the baby emergency fund, in the next 2 weeks. Second homework assignment, I want you to pray. If you're one of those kinds of people who believes in prayer, I want you to pray for protection as you make this commitment. Because if you are making the commitment to get out of debt, and you are making the commitment, excuse me, and you're making the commitment to set up an emergency fund, an amount of cash, then what you're doing is you're saying, you know what? I'm not going to rely on debt anymore. And pretty much surefire thing that's going to happen is life. Something's going to hit you. You're going to blow a tire. So your kid's going to need braces. Something's going to come up and you're like, uh-oh, that was unplanned. So pray for protection for your household while you make this commitment and while you begin to do the savings process, okay? It's just like when we'll talk about budgeting soon. We have to understand that life is not perfect and our activities aren't perfect. We can only do our best. So pray for your protection and the protection of your family. Now, is the baby emergency fund your end point? Is that the stop of, now that I've got an emergency fund of 1 paycheck, I'm free and clear? No, you can't say I'm done once I've reached that. Our ultimate goal is going to be to have an emergency fund, excuse me, that is 3 to 6 months of expenses. That is not 3 to 6 months of income, 3 to 6 months of expenses. That's where we're aiming toward. Here's the attitude I want you to have toward finances, okay? I want you, if you hate your job, to be able to quit and find another one, okay? I want that to be a possibility for you. I don't want you to keep working at a job you hate because you have to receive the paycheck next week. I want you to have the attitude that if something goes wrong in your life and you can't work, if you got a family member who's terminally ill and you need to take some time off, that you can do that and spend some money out of your emergency fund instead of relying on, I'm sorry I can't come be with you as you're dying because guess what? I have to go to work. I want you to have some freedom. So 3 to 6 months of expenses is our long-term goal so that you are not relying on that paycheck in the short term or the little bit longer term. I like to say sometimes when I'm speaking, I joke and say, you know what, if I hated my job, I'd quit, I'd go flip burgers and we'd be good for a year or two. Because I'd have some income, I'd have something to do with my time, and not that flipping burgers is not a worthwhile pursuit, it's just not going to pay as well as what I'm doing today. That's the point. You could say deliver pizzas, you could say work at a convenience store, or take your pick. I mean, it's not about the income thing or the type of job, it is not necessarily going to be the currently paying job that I would replace it with. You can stop living paycheck to paycheck. Do it. Again, I can't make you. I can't give you the motivation. I can only give you the tools. So there's your homework assignments. Write down 5 ways you can start that baby emergency fund. Pray for protection as you go through the steps to make this commitment work for you. So that's all I've got today. I hope that's helpful. I hope it's been useful to you. And you know, doggone it, we are going to get through this. And I'm so excited about what's on the other side for us all. So take care. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.